There's been some pretty interesting news out of Germany. The German National Academy of Sciences has just released a major policy paper. It's starting to define aging as a disease target.
Why aging has been historically neglected.
Aging isn't considered a disease causer, so you can't create drugs that target aging.
We came up with post-chemo aging as a market. People who get chemo get a lot of aging-related phenotypes very quickly after the chemo exposure.
Your decision to go to the UAE for this trial and not do it in the US where you're based, can you talk to me about that?
A trial that may take over a year to get up and running in the US.
Hello and welcome everyone back to the DeSci podcast. It is me, your host, Ella. You guys all know me at this point, but today I'm being joined by my colleague, Alana.
Hey everyone, excited to be here.
But yeah, Alana and I actually decided to just hop onto the mics, as you will, today because there's been some pretty interesting news out of Germany that we wanted to speak to you about, which is that the German National Academy of Sciences has just released a major policy paper. And the reason it's so major is because it's starting to define aging as a disease target. And so what that means is they're starting to look at aging as a cause of disease, which, I mean, really, you'd think this feels obvious. I mean, Alana, wouldn't you? Like, everyone knows as you age, you get more ill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, do you think there's a reason why aging has been historically neglected?
Well, so it's an interesting question because as much as one goes like, okay, obviously aging causes disease, the way that many regulatory bodies are set up at the moment is that aging isn't considered a disease causer. So you can't create drugs that target aging, which has been a really, really big boon in the, actually, I don't know if boon's the right word, but in the aging and the longevity community, not being able to create drugs that target aging kind of really slows down this pace of progress. And I mean, honestly, it was so surprising to me when I saw that it was a German institution that had released this sort of big policy shift. Molecule here is like we're based in Germany, and so I think know a lot of people in the German biotech industry, and they've often spoken about how they feel like the German biotech scene moves very slowly. So. Yeah, I think I was very happily surprised to see it.
Yeah, so do you think this could also signal the shift of, a general shift in the industry?
I hope so. So yeah, I mean, with this change, we're going to start to see a difference in the way that drugs are being developed. So, I mean, like one of the most, I think, typical use cases or examples of like how the old regulatory systems prevent anti-aging drugs from coming about is Rapamycin. And so those of you who are longevity like nerds and are super into it, you'll know Rapamycin. It's kind of one of the most classically considered anti-aging drugs. But interestingly enough, it was not developed to be an anti-aging drug because it couldn't be, because there's no regulation around, you know, what it is, how to develop that. So it was actually developed as an immune suppressant. It was given to patients when they were post-organ transplant. And while that was happening, and actually, do you know what, this concept of a drug having an off-target effect and that turning into like its real sort of commercializable aspect is not uncommon. In fact, Viagra, I think was like a blood pressure medicine, and then just noticed as well, like, you know, it helped with other things.
I think Ozempic was also initially.
Exactly. So this idea of like a drug being tested for one thing and then someone realizing like, hey, it's actually having these off-target effects that are really beneficial is not uncommon. But in Rapamycin's case, they were testing Rapamycin and they noticed that all of the mice that were receiving Rapamycin had these extended lifespans, which was obviously great. Like, you know, when you notice something like that, you want to pursue it more. But there was not really any recourse to take that further because you can't, like the way the FDA is set up, you can't design a clinical trial that's aiming to stop aging because they don't consider aging a disease. You can't fix something that they don't consider as a broken process. And so now what happens is if you want to take rapamycin, and I mean, here at Molecule with Vita DAO and stuff, we're intimately acquainted with the longevity community. I know a lot of longevity maxis, and I know people that take rapamycin and they get prescribed by their sort of GP. But like me with my biochemistry background, it makes me a little bit concerned. I mean, not concerned, but like I would feel so much more like satisfied if the drug could be developed with the purpose of being an anti-aging medication, because then it gets like you're able to refine, your safety and your efficacy, and you're able to take it through all those regulations that do exist for a reason.
Yeah.
But what it means is that like longevity and longevity medication has had to become this like much more fringe thing, and creates a lot of, I think, obviously it slows down progress, but for me it also is like concerning. It's preventing a lot of safety and sort of really good studies into it.
Yeah, and makes potential medicines being stuck in this gray area, right? Where
Exactly.
people are almost forced to use it off-label.
Exactly. But this is I think why we're chatting today as well, is because obviously so Germany's sent out this policy shift or paper on an intention of policy shift, which knowing German bureaucracy, it's basically a letter of intention, but who knows where that will end up. But there are in fact countries that are already like looking at fast-tracked regulatory pathways and looking at changing this paradigm of aging is not a disease. And one of them is Abu Dhabi, interestingly, in the UAE.
So, what does their non-standard framework of longevity look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, so they launched the world's first declaration on longevity and precision medicine. So I think like they really are looking to make a name for themselves there. I mean, obviously are doing a call. They're trying to build their biotech scene. It's kind of a win-win situation because researchers that aren't able to sort of design a clinical trial in the way that they want are able to, go build the biotech scene in the UAE, and the UAE is able to like have this upwind, and the researchers are able to, do research in the way that they want to do it. But it calls for fast-tracking promising intervention. They're also investing in biomarkers, and they are updating trial standards. So, for example, one such trial standard is always, you have to test all drugs in non-human primates, which is essentially apes and monkeys and that sort of thing. But in some cases, this is actually not going to create the right type and valuable data. Obviously non-human primate models are very essential in many things, but model organisms, which is what you call sort of like a mouse or anything that you're testing, as you call it, a model organism, if they're not really sort of clearly defined on what benefit and what your data you're going to be able to gain from them, they often are done as sort of these check boxes of like, okay, you have to test on this model organism, you have to do this, without it actually really being completely necessary if that drug is functioning in a certain way. Obviously, I'm using a whole bunch of vague statements here, but, the human physiology and biology is so complicated. And different drugs will need to be tested in different ways. And having this very like rigid one pathway means that a lot of excess money is spent. I also personally don't love the idea of animal testing when it's not completely necessary, and that sort of thing. So Abu Dhabi is basically saying, not that you don't have to do these things, but like, let's really figure out what's necessary, what's going to be beneficial, and how can we speed up this process for researchers.
Yeah, amazing. And that they also, recategorize the longevity research, right? And,
Exactly. Yeah.
being able to put or provide at least a category or a box where we can put this research into. And
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so they also are like focusing hard on geroscience as one of the sort of areas that they're looking to create biotech innovation, which is, I think, it's a smart idea, honestly. I mean, I think we can all see that longevity is a rising trend. We've got our Brian Johnsons and all of that, and people are becoming a lot more health conscious. I mean, there's some crazy stats that like the youth, the like 18 to 21-year-olds, at the moment are drinking less than any, like the drinking rates are going down in the youth.
Exactly. The club scene is dying slowly.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually have seen people have been doing uh, cappuccino raves, which is basically you go raving but at a cafe.
Yeah,
So
but that's the thing, right? That's the new
yeah.
thing, to consume it in a healthy way. And
Yeah, but there's such a focus now on living healthily, doing good for your body. Everyone's making sure they're hitting their protein targets and all of these things.
yeah,
But you know, the body is a machine, and you're gonna have cogs and pieces that break over time with use. And so the next ultimate focus that people are going to be needing to think about is like, what medications can they take that are going to help? I think it's also like this. Like what I quite like about this longevity medicine as well as a concept, it's very much like sort of shifting a paradigm of, instead of like you age, your cellular processes break down, and then that results in something like cancer, and then you're treating the cancer, is like you're so far down the line at that point that you really are just managing like what's an inevitability. Whereas if you can target these processes that are inherent to aging, then you don't reach the point where you get cancer, because you're already making sure your cells are like healthy and happy and sort of, so it's an invaluable sort of area to be looking in.
yeah, and also to be proactive and not just reactive about.
Exactly. So yeah, it's been very cool to see Abu Dhabi making this shift, and I hope that other countries will follow in their suit.
Yeah, like Germany.
Yes. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Maybe we've got the next most amazing clinical trials here in Germany.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. But speaking of clinical trials, there's also some other good news that Alana and I wanted to hop on onto the podcast and talk about, which is about one of the projects in the DeSci space, R10 Bio, who is going to be using this sort of innovation within Abu Dhabi and is looking at running a human clinical trial in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, so maybe you can also give a more general picture of R10 Bio's approach, and how they tackle this regulatory evolution and how their therapy works.
Of course. So maybe it's actually good to give you like a little background history of like what R10 Bio is, and also why they came to DeSci in the first place. Because also for those of you who don't know, R10 Bio, the token is VITA RNA, but they were funded in part by VITA DAO, which is a longevity DAO. So it's a community of people who are looking to fund and progress longevity science. But yeah, I'd say about a year ago, no, maybe longer, even 2 years ago, the primary researcher, so a man named Michael Torres, approached VITA DAO and sort of said, I have this molecule that I've identified that is very good at suppressing a specific type of mutation in the body. And that mutation is basically a tumor suppressor. So, what it does is it takes away your tumor suppressor. So the mutation means that your body is no longer able to suppress tumors, which means more tumors in the body, which means not great things. And so he's figured out how to stop this mutation happening. Anyway, approached VITA DAO. They did an initial fundraise, I think of like 70 or 90,000 USD. And yeah, got more good data, and then did another fundraise, and they used Molecule's intellectual property token model to fundraise, and then they did, I think, even a third fundraise. And I've managed to progress this compound, which, I mean, for me, it's a freaking great use case of DeSci, and it's really cool to see, like, also, I think it's also cool for me to see, like, a researcher, come in, get funding, and then like come back for more and be like, yeah, I like having this community. I think this is a good way to fund science, and like that they are a returning customer in that sense. Yeah, but yeah, it's an anti-aging project that aims at mutations.
Yes. Okay, so they're after their third funding round now, and they also just gave us some new updates about their project, right?
Exactly. So we got to actually speak to Michael, so I will put in a clip in a second. But yeah, I think Michael was describing essentially why they've chosen to move to the UAE. The project is based in the US. And yeah, for a lot of reasons that we've kind of mentioned in the podcast, that is the reason that they chose. And they're in conversations with the UAE for designing this clinical trial. Hi, Michael. Please could you talk to me about why you've chosen post-chemo aging as a target?
So, when you think historically about aging, there's always been a challenge of how do you run a trial? What does the trial look like? And what do regulators, there's no such thing as an aging, aging as an indication, right? There's no accepted view of what that could look like from a trial and regulatory point of view. So in discussion with regulators, particularly in the UAE, we brainstormed about a way to take R10 102 and our project into the aging space in a way that could unlock two things that are really important for stakeholders. One, a commercially viable, attractive market, like a big market, right? And then also, again, like definitively addressing aging-related outcomes and phenotypes. And so for us, we in discussions came up with post-chemo aging as a market. And so as one can imagine, and this is widely known with folks who get chemo, and particularly in children, like they'll get gray hair, they get a lot of aging related phenotypes very quickly after the chemo exposure. And so again, with the mechanism of R10 102, there's the potential to address, slow, potentially reverse those those outcomes. And so in this case, chemo, people who get chemo, it's a huge market, right? There's, I forget the number, but like maybe it's 12 million a year of people who get chemo, and a large percent of them have aging, accelerated aging. And so this is, again, a really unique opportunity to again, show that we're addressing aging, but in a huge, potentially huge market, huge patient population. And so I think in contrast to what has been, I think, the challenge in the past, like how do you come up with an aging drug or indication? Most folks have tried to look at things like progeria, which is a rare disease, a lot of rare. And what's great about rare, though, it's usually very genetically defined, and so how to address it. But then the patient population is so small because it is rare that it's very hard to make a commercial case for these drugs. And that's been, I think, the challenge there. And so again, for us, I think we've solved an important part where, one, we have regulators who are thinking about addressing aging in an indication that actually makes sense for aging, but is also a potentially huge market opportunity. And so I think that's what we're really excited about, to be able to move that forward and potentially be transformative, not only for aging, but like a very important like drug, because unfortunately so many people get chemo year over year.
Super interesting. And I mean, your decision to sort of go to the UAE for this trial and not do it sort of in the US where you're based, can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, so in discussions with regulators in the region, and I should point out, I was just on a call with somebody who's working in Kazakhstan as well, who also they're very open to helping be very efficient in running clinical trials, right? They want to attract more biotech drug development into the region. I think unlike the FDA, and actually it's changing a bit in the US as well. So I want to give them credit for that. The new administration certainly is being very proactive. Is that the regulatory hurdles are much lower and in the region, and that doesn't mean that you cut corners in any way. They are essentially, the way I like to say it is, FDA puts out guidance about like you can use, you don't have to use animal models. You don't have to use, non-human primates for safety, blah, blah, blah. You can use organoids, which is, again, guidance that FDA has talked about. Well, the folks and the regulators in those regions are like implementing those things already. And so that you do only need single species tox data to get an IND approved. Of course, CMC, manufacturing, everything else has to be really robust. So there's a lot of efficiency in getting an IND or, a trial approved. And then, of course, because there's not so much biotech in the region, the clinical trial costs, the incentives for the hospital systems to help manage, recruit patients, it's much more efficient as well. And so again, a trial that may take over a year to get up and running and enrolled in the US, it could be like 6 months. It could be, a lot faster. And so again, there's just a lot more efficiency on the capital side, on the patient side, on, the data and biomarkers, genetics that have already been like captured by the governments in the region also makes it where it's just a very, very efficient path in multiple ways. So that, again, and it's easier to have conversations with them as well. And so for all those reasons, it makes a lot of sense for us to explore doing things in the region.
Amazing, thank you. I mean, we could be witnessing sort of a shifting of the tides, where we're looking at these new sort of hotspots of innovation like Abu Dhabi, in clinical trials and drug development, which is really exciting. Cool. And lastly, if someone wants to get involved to support your project, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, so I would start with going to vitarna.xyz, and there you'll find more insight into the project. Of course, we have a Telegram chat where token holders can also interface with me and the rest of the team. And I'm pretty active on Twitter or X as well. So we like to share a lot of updates too. So, and then molecule.xyz on more on the token side, and, updates from the company are uploaded there to our, the labs. And so the labs page. And so again, I think, there's multiple ways to stay engaged and with us.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Michael. And thank you for all the work that you do to keep us all young and healthy.
No problem.
So thank you to Michael for hopping on a call with us and discussing it. I always think it's good to hear from the researcher themselves. Michael's also a great example of like a researcher that has built community and is very conversational. Like you said, you can hop on the Telegram chat and literally ask him a question about the science, which is like, again, DeSci, it's a cool place. I mean, in what other framework would you be able to like just contact a leading sort of longevity researcher and ask them about their work and be
exactly.
like, hey, how can I support? But yeah, more so than just this podcast or Michael's update, they have been uploading their updates to our molecule platform, our molecule page. So if you want to learn more about what Michael Torres is doing and also about this clinical trial, he's just recently uploaded a deck, a non-confidential deck, onto Molecule Lab. So if you go onto his token page on molecule.xyz, and the token is VITA RNA, you can click on an update and you can see about what his budget is looking for the clinical trial, what the necessary things and steps that they'll have to take, and yeah, really what they're looking to target. So as Michael mentioned, it was a post-chemo aging condition. And of course, they're thinking about it and the addressable market and all that sort of stuff. So you get to really understand quite intimately like what this project is planning to do. So all you need to do is navigate to the page, read about it, and hopefully it inspires you.